making better incomes, they would be able to pay higher wages. This would make housing more affordable to more New Zealanders, as well as creating better jobs. So I think we need to now that we've got this reputation and we know that we work hard to earn it, we also need to work equally hard to harvest the benefits from it.
Great to have you on, Suzanne. I appreciate your time. Chair of Transparency International New Zealand, Suzanne Snively there. Your thoughts on that, Susan? What do you think? You certainly, one does notice it if you've had the experience of, if you have travelled overseas and, you have a bribe experience with a local official or something like that, you go, oh gosh, we are not bad at home.
I think we're small, but we're sophisticated, so there's eyes on everyone. We're also, I think, fundamentally honest people, and we don't tolerate dishonesty. But you wonder if the world's standards are dropping, because we've dropped from 91 to 87 and we're still coming first. So are we all becoming more corrupt? And is that, going back to what we've been talking about, sort of fake news and some of the consequences of all of that?
On a final note, I want to sneak this one because it was interesting. The first instalment of, the Empire, the famed Empire magazine has put out their greatest films of the 21st century. So they've got 100, but the top 10, Lost in Translation, which is a fantastic Sofia Coppola. Pan's Labyrinth, number 9. Get Out in 2017. Avengers Infinity War. The Social Network. Moonlight. Inception, number 4. The Dark Knight, directed by Chris Nolan, starring Heath Ledger, at number 3. And guess what's number 2? Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. And they say there has never been a cinematic fantasy saga like Lord of the Rings, and its opening chapter remains its crowning achievement. Susan, were you a fan? Are you a fan?
I have never seen any of those movies. No. I think they were too long. I've got a short attention span, and I can only sit still for 1 hour.
Hang on. You've seen though, Alan.
I have a very, very short attention span also. I couldn't sit through it. I will say, because I'm on an acting gig on the one that's being filmed here, I've seen it many times and it's my favourite movie ever. But really, I've never seen any of the movies.
You are absolutely kidding, both of you.
No. I don't have 14 or 15 hours to sit down.
But if it makes anybody feel any better, I've only seen possibly 1 out of the top 10, and that I can't remember particularly. So,
right.
But it's great for New Zealand. Fantastic.
Yes.
Very proud. Very proud.
Yes, it's great. I think it's fantastic, and I have seen it, and I absolutely loved it. I'm a big fan of Lord of the Rings. Mad Max Fury Road, the 2015 version. Have you seen that, either of you? Because it is absolutely fantastic. That was number 1, and it said, it's an unhinged piece of art, an astounding piece of action cinema, a visionary piece of filmmaking.
I've seen the originals and loved them as a kid, but the new one I haven't got around to seeing it yet. So now, if it's the best movie ever, I suppose I should.
Did you say that you were an extra in a film?
No, I want to get a bit. I do acting, and I want to get a bit in the Lord of the Rings. I'm saying it to my agent. Look, that's the only gig I can do where I have my accent. You know what I mean? I can sound like a gremlin.
You've got
probably helps to see it first.
Yeah.
You've got 15 seconds to promote yourself.
Give us a gig. How many seconds? Yeah. Give us a gig.
The Friday mailbag is full for next week. A lot of comments on benefit levels, but for now though, Susan Hornsby-Gallick and Alan McElroy, thank you so much for being with me on Friday afternoon.
Thanks, Wallace.
Thank you. Wonderful. I'm back Monday afternoon from 3:45pm. Checkpoint next. Till then.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, the death toll from coronavirus continues to climb overseas, while Chinese New Zealanders fear the potentially deadly infection could only be a plane ride away. A life-extending cystic fibrosis drug gets a provisional thumbs up from Pharmac for funding. We talked to the father of a 2.5-year-old who could live decades longer as a result. Explosive evidence in the rape trial of the former movie mogul Harvey Weinstein. And at Ratana, the Prime Minister's asked to prove what her year of delivery's done for Māori. And stand by for some stonking temperatures over the weekend. We'll tell you where it's going to be hot, hot, hot.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. Health authorities in New South Wales are investigating 4 possible cases of the deadly coronavirus in Sydney. They won't say where the patients are being treated or if the patients were on a flight which arrived in Sydney yesterday from the Chinese city of Wuhan. China is ramping up restrictions on movement during the country's busiest travel season. 25 people have now died there in the coronavirus outbreak. The BBC's Grant Ferret reports.
The shutdown of public transport and closure of some main roads, which began on Thursday in Wuhan, has now spread to 7 other cities in the region. There's been no official word on how long the restrictions will last. In Wuhan itself, where the virus was first detected, hospitals are said to be suffering shortages of protective masks and gloves. There are also reports of dwindling food stocks and rising prices. One resident of Wuhan told the BBC that the shelves of his local supermarket were largely empty. The impact of measures to control the outbreak is being felt elsewhere in China, with Beijing cancelling all large-scale holiday celebrations.
Grant Ferret reporting. Meanwhile, the University of Queensland is confident it can develop a vaccine for the coronavirus in as few as 16 weeks. Researchers are using new rapid medical development technology to help create a vaccine for the new virus strain. Lines company Vector won't be compensating customers who lost power in Auckland's CBD yesterday. The power outage struck the city centre as well as Parnell and Grafton at lunchtime. Annika Smith reports.
The power went out during the lunchtime bustle in Auckland's CBD. It was back on by 2 o'clock, but by then many businesses had been forced to shut their doors. Vector has acknowledged power outages are inconvenient for customers, but says it doesn't have to pay out. A spokesperson says outages lasting less than 2 hours in the CBD don't meet the threshold for compensation. Power was restored in the CBD in 48 minutes and in Parnell within an hour and a half. Vector hasn't yet said what the cause of the outage was, saying its investigation into the problem may take several days. Ko Annika Smith aho.
The Prime Minister has defended her government's record on Māori issues, responding to criticism from Māori leaders at the annual Ratana celebrations. Among concerns raised were that armed police would target Māori and spending in whānau ora and oranga tamariki. But Ms Ardern was praised for spending in the regions and for bringing her 19-month-old daughter Neve to the pā. Jacinda Ardern says the government has delivered for Māori.
We will keep going. We will be human and make mistakes, but with courage and support and strength, we can keep working on behalf of our collective people.
Jacinda Ardern says the Labour alliance with Ratana was important to her and still ran strong. Rents are rising at their fastest rate in more than a decade. The latest Consumer Price Index shows rents jumped by 3.1% for the year. Paul Pascoe from Statistics New Zealand says this is the highest annual increase since 2008.
We've had reports of pretty tight markets in parts of the country, and that's obviously coming through in the regional statistics. We see rents in Wellington, for example, up 4.5% for the year, and rents in the wider North Island, excluding Auckland, up 4.9%.
Overall, the Consumer Price Index rose by 1.9% in the year to December. Officials have been notified of a passenger with measles who travelled on 2 flights between Tonga and Auckland this week. The Auckland Regional Public Health Service is warning passengers should be vigilant for symptoms of the highly infectious disease. The passenger departed Auckland 8:30 on Monday morning, returning from Nuku'alofa at 12:30 on Wednesday. It's 4 minutes past 5. A wide-ranging review of rugby in New Zealand is being undertaken, with the sports administrators admitting the game is under pressure. New Zealand Rugby says the time is right for a review, with people engaging differently in sporting activities, entertainment and leisure. Participation, fan engagement, elite player retention and finances will all come under the spotlight. New Zealand Rugby Chief Operation Officer Nikki Nicol says there is an acceptance in the sport that change is needed, but what form that change takes is up for debate.
We're trying to make rugby better. We still want kids playing in the local communities, and we still want to be winning on the world stage with our elite teams. And so how we do that is really up for grabs. You know, it is quite wide-ranging, and we will kind of probably eat the elephant one bite at a time.
The initial findings of the review are expected to be completed by the end of May. New Zealand batsman Ross Taylor says it'll be nice to move on from their tour of Australia and get stuck into the Indians. The first of 5 T20 internationals is at Eden Park tonight. The Black Caps were thumped 3-0 by Australia in the Test series, and Taylor says it's great to be playing at home against another top team.
Well, I guess it's time to move on after what was a tough month and a bit. But we're back on home soil, and India will be totally different opposition. Number one team in the world, but obviously in conditions that we know.
Ross Taylor. That's the news.
Jobs at risk in Northland.
If the plant closes, we've got 110 people whose livelihood is impacted severely.
Nervous times for Wellington bus users.
Should Wellington bus users be quaking in their boots about this?
They should be cautious about some of the changes that we're making.
And preparing for a heat wave.
And the cargo could reach potentially near 30 degrees today, and that's well above average for the time of year.
Stories from across the country. Morning Report, weekdays from 6, on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Fine apart from isolated afternoon and evening showers about the ranges. Also areas of low cloud morning and night. For the remainder of the North Island, mainly fine, but areas of low cloud morning and night. To Nelson and Marlborough, fine with high cloud tomorrow afternoon. For Bulla to Fiordland, mainly fine at first, rain developing in Fiordland tonight, then slowly spreading north tomorrow. Some heavy falls are possible in Fiordland and southern Westland. Canterbury, fine weather tonight, cloudy periods tomorrow, isolated showers south of Timaru from tomorrow afternoon. Otago and Southland, fine today, scattered showers tomorrow, possible thunderstorms for inland Otago, showers clearing Southland tomorrow afternoon. Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy. RNZ National. It's 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. And this is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Shortly, we'll have more on the rising death toll from the coronavirus. But this evening, we begin in Ratana, where politicians have gathered and have been using the opportunity to say what they'll be doing this year to deliver to Māori. In the lead up to today's events, issues like ihu mātou and the handling of whānau ora funds remained unresolved. Political reporter Charlie Drever is at Ratana and joins us now live. Good evening, Charlie. Was the government challenged on those issues today at Ratana?
There was a lot of speculation on whether they would be strongly contested on ihu mātou and on whānau ora. Other than a few brief acknowledgements, they weren't facing much criticism over this. It was acknowledged by the Minister in charge of whānau ora, Pene Henare, that the dispute was happening, and he also extended an invitation to those Māori leaders who want that urgent Waitangi tribunal to meet with the PM. They've already accepted that, but he was once again extending that olive branch to speak with the government. We also heard from the Prime Minister on ihu mātou. Again, nothing really concrete in terms of a way forward to find a resolution. However, she did thank the King for his role in those discussions. Some other topics, though, the government did face some harsh criticism. For example, Shay Wilson from the Māori Party, he spoke about the inequality that Māori are facing by the armed response teams. He compared it even to the US, and he was really strong on that. We also heard from a spokesperson from the Kingitangi, Rahui Papa. He said that they didn't want the government to throw them lollies. They wanted to know what the government was doing and what they're planning to do, because what's good for Māori is good for all New Zealanders.
Now, the Māori Party was welcomed onto the par with National. Was there any meaning behind this?
We heard from the Māori Party today, and they said there wasn't any meaning behind it necessarily. They've walked on to the par with other parties in the past. However, we did hear from National when they were asked about it that they said in the past that they had worked very well with Māori before. So I don't know whether or not that may be an indication if they're willing to shack up with the Māori Party 2020 if they get into government.
Describe the atmosphere there overall. What's it been like?
It's, as you can probably see, it's been a gloriously sunny day. The atmosphere here has been just really calm and relaxed. All of the politicians, regardless of what political party they've come from, have been very warmly welcome here. There's lots of, you may be able to see in the background, there's lots of people walking around, lots of rangatahi running around enjoying themselves, because even though we see a lot of the politicians here, the overall meaning behind this today is to celebrate the birthday of the Prophet Ratana, and also we're going to see some festivities tomorrow as well, minus the politicians.
Thanks, Charlie. That's our political reporter, Charlie Drever, joining us live from Ratana. With the death toll from the coronavirus now at 25 and more than 800 people infected in China, many Chinese New Zealanders say clearer advice is needed from authorities here. Originating in the Chinese city of Wuhan, the virus has spread to countries including Thailand, Japan, South Korea and the United States. With many people returning from New Year celebrations in China, and the new school term about to begin, panic is growing in the Chinese New Zealand community over what they say is a lack of information from the government. Chen Liu reports.
James Sun is the father of 2 school-aged children in central Auckland. A Chinese New Zealander, he has been following news about the coronavirus, and with schools due to open from next week, he's worried.
Next week, private schools, they're going to have the new semester. And then the week after that is going to be most of the public schools that they're going to open for the new semester. And a lot of parents, children, they're coming back to New Zealand after this week because of the Chinese New Year. And I think that's a big challenge to not only school, but the whole society.
Mr. Sun says he's phoned the Ministry of Education and is drafting a letter asking it to improve communications with health authorities to curb panic among the community.
If you pay attention to the local Chinese social media, like WeChat, the panic level is already reaching to a new level. So the audience in Chinese social media is very panicked at the moment.
But Mr. Sun says instead of panicking, there are simple things everyone can do.
Regular hand washing, like if you're coughing, how to cover your cough and sneeze, and if you have any syndrome, whom you should report to, and what kind of syndrome that you should be aware with. I think education, promotion, and advising to the students is very important, and also their parents.
Auckland mum Mr. Wu, whose 8-year-old son is in Wuhan visiting his grandparents, has told his school about the situation. She says everyone needs to play their part in preventing the virus from spreading. Her words have been translated.
People who are in China now, they can either call or email your associates in New Zealand when you went back to China, where you are and all the other details. Although I don't know what coping measures will New Zealand take. I think that means you're taking responsibility for yourself as well as others.
Meanwhile, several schools are sending emails to parents advising them about the symptoms of the virus, warning students with high temperatures to delay their travel back to New Zealand and stay away from school for a week if they have been in Wuhan recently. The Deputy Secretary for Education, Katrina Casey, told RNZ in a statement that officials are working closely with the Health Ministry to ensure they have the most up-to-date information.
We understand that a lot of the guidance we have previously sent to schools for the management of the measles outbreak last year will still be applicable. The Ministry of Health is reviewing that content for us. We expect to have more comprehensive advice to go to schools either today or Monday. We will continue to work closely with the Ministry of Health to ensure schools and early learning services have the most up-to-date information.
The Institute of Environmental Science and Research says it should have a lab test set up to screen for the deadly virus by the end of next week. All New Zealanders travelling to China are being encouraged to register with the Safe Travel website to stay up to date with travel alerts. The World Health Organization announced today the outbreak is not yet at the point where it needs to declare an international public health emergency. For Checkpoint, this is Chen Liu.
It is 14 minutes after 5. Let us know what you think about that. Is there enough official information out there on the coronavirus? If your children are returning to school next week, have you been sent anything from the school, and what kind of advice or information have you been provided with? You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The driver involved in a fatal police pursuit near Taupō last night is alleged to have travelled through a cordon at 140 kilometres an hour before officers began their chase. Police were already at the scene of a one-vehicle crash where the driver died when they were warned of another car approaching at speed. They opted to take up the chase, which ended shortly after when the driver crashed. His passenger died at the scene. Andrew McRae reports.
Police were already attending a fatal road crash at around 11:40 last night when they became involved in the pursuit of a speeding driver a few hours later. That crash also proved fatal after a 45-year-old male passenger died at the scene. The driver of the car, a 28-year-old man, has been charged with dangerous driving causing death. Bay of Plenty District Commander Andy McGregor says the man was driving between 140 and 150 kilometres an hour down Broadlands Road towards the scene of the earlier crash. He says the driver passed an unmarked vehicle driven by a police photographer heading to the original crash.
The photographer radioed ahead to the scene. He is a bit afraid for the safety of the staff there to say that this vehicle was approaching them. A vehicle was sent from the scene to where the roadblock was to ensure the safety of those civilian contractors manning that roadblock. As the vehicle approached the roadblock, it turned right into Centennial Drive. The police lights were activated. The vehicle failed to stop.
Superintendent McGregor says what happened next was very quick.
The police vehicle then followed the vehicle for about a short time, less than 30 seconds. The vehicle lost control on a corner and went through a horse fence with the railing type horse fence. The vehicle ended up in a paddock.
He says officers witnessed the crash.
They were just catching up to the vehicle. They didn't have time to even actually notify comms at the time. It was a very, very, very short period of time within the space of 500 to 700 metres.
Superintendent McGregor described the driver as a motivated offender who, for his own reasons, did what he did.
If people stop, these things don't happen. And, you know, I look at our staff especially, and you've got young staff there, less than a year's service, and, you know, they're very visibly upset about this whole incident.
He says it's very frustrating when drivers refuse to stop for police, as the outcome can be tragic.
You imagine one of your friends and family that was coming around that corner, and that car lost control when they were coming around that corner and hit them and killed them. And you'd see police at a roadblock and say, why didn't you stop them? You know, it's an expectation of the public out there that we stop these vehicles because they may kill an innocent third party.
The 28-year-old male driver suffered moderate injuries in the crash. He's appeared in the Taupō District Court. The death will be investigated by the Independent Police Conduct Authority and police investigators. For Checkpoint, Ko Andrew McRae Tēnei.
It's almost 19 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Another broken wastewater pipe in Wellington means trucks are hauling 1 million litres of sludge a day to landfill, a move that could cost ratepayers more than $1 million. The latest failure, which happened last week, occurred in the Mount Albert sewer tunnel, part of a 9-kilometre pipeline that carries sewage from Moore Point on the city's south coast to the southern landfill. Jonathan Mitchell reports.
The decision to truck the brown sludge to the dump could last weeks and could run into the millions of dollars. The trucks are driving up to 150 trips every day, and the return trip from the Moore Point treatment plant to the dump takes an hour. Wellington Water's Chief Wastewater Advisor, Steve Hutchison, says they may need to operate around the clock at times to keep up with the volume. He says the option of sending the sludge directly up to Cook Strait isn't preferred.
The alternatives to this are the slurry going out untreated out to the Cook Strait. That would be not preferred, That was what the plant was set up as its last resort, as its backup. So we have the pipework in place, but we're undertaking all efforts we can to avoid having to do that.
He says it's highly unusual for both underground pipes to fail at once.
These are, in our view, relatively young pipes. They were laid in 1994 as part of the works to get the Moa Point treatment plant enabled.
Yes, so why has this happened if they're so new?
We still have to get into verify exactly what the cause of failure was.
In December, a wastewater pipe collapsed in the CBD, which caused more than 5 million litres of sewage to spill into the harbour. Currently, an above-ground black pipe was working in its place, but plans are underway to put it all underground. Wellington Water's Chief Executive, Colin Crampton, says that black pipe should be off Willis Street in a couple of months.
The reason that's significant is that the black pipe on the surface at the moment is not only disrupting traffic and public transport, but also affecting the businesses in the area. So the council and ourselves are very focused on getting the black pipe off the road and underground.
He says decommissioning the old wastewater tunnel that collapsed will take longer.
Closing that off so that it's never used again is a complex and risky project, and so we are still investigating into that, and we'll make a separate announcement around the timing of when Dixon Street will be able to reopen permanently, because it's a different time frame.
The Mayor Andy Foster hopes once the black pipe is underground, traffic will be able to flow more freely. This afternoon, he personally thanked the companies that worked around the clock to limit the flow of sewage into the harbour before Christmas. For Checkpoint, call Jonathan Mitchell, TNA.
The father of a young boy with a rare mutation of cystic fibrosis is relieved and excited that Pharmac looks set to finally fund a drug that could mean his son's life is decades longer than predicted. Pharmac announced it's reached a provisional agreement with the supplier of Kaleidoco, and pending further consultation, the drug could be available as early as March. That's after years of petitioning from some families. The government's drug buying agency declined the initial application back in 2014 due to limited evidence of its benefits for the rare disorder that damages the lungs and digestive system. One of the people who fought for Kaleidoco to be funded is Eddie Porter, whose 2.5-year-old son Otis has cystic fibrosis. Eddie says the news today is exciting first and foremost for his son, who might just get a new chance at life.
There's also just such excitement for all the other families in New Zealand that have this same condition. So there's young children, there's brothers, sisters, mothers and fathers with this condition, and to each of them it's just such a huge opportunity. And the same thing, it's a renewed chance at life, and it's a changed life, one much for the better, and that's really exciting. And I guess the final part of that is there's hope there that this is medicine for a rare disorder, really. So G551D, cystic fibrosis, is technically a rare disorder. Its incidence rate is 1 in 156,000, and Kaleidoco being funded is a great source of hope that other medicines for rare disorders might be funded too, that other families can share in the excitement that we're feeling right now.
So what difference do you think this drug will make to your son who has cystic fibrosis?
So the clinical data for this drug is really sound and robust, and we know that if he can get on Kaleidoco early enough, so my son's 2.5 years old, if he is on this early enough, he is much less likely to get sick, and the illnesses that he does get, he'll be able to get rid of a lot more easily, and those illnesses typically manifest in the lungs, so the people with CF are more prone to lung infections. Those lung infections can set in, are really difficult to shake, and ultimately cause lung damage and loss of lung function. So if Otis is on Kaleidoco, a lot of that damage is nipped in the bud, so it can't happen in the first place. So for Otis, it's going to mean a lot less pain, a lot less suffering, a lot less time away from school and friends and all of those sort of things through illness. It's also going to mean improved lung function. So although he's still quite young, the chances are there's already a build-up of the secretions in his lungs, which can cause a degradation in lung function. It's going to nip that in the bud as well. And
so a longer life.
Cases,
so a longer life expectancy, Eddie?
Yes, absolutely. So the life expectancy as it stands in New Zealand for someone with CF is 37 years. And, well, the sky's the limit for people on Kalydeco. Probably decades added to that if he can have access to Kalydeco early enough.
How long have you been waiting for this?
We've been waiting about 2.5 years. So Otis was 2.5 years, and he was diagnosed shortly after birth. So as soon as we found out his particular gene type, and we learned more about Kalydeco and that he would benefit greatly from it, we've been trying to get Kalydeco for him. We've been trying to get the best treatment we can for him. So,
but it was out of your reach.
Waiting.
It was out of your reach financially without funding from Pharmac. Yeah,
absolutely. The list price, so the price that Joe Public would pay if they were to go and buy Kalydeco, is $360,000 a year, and that's just so far beyond the bounds of anything we could reasonably think to afford on a personal level that it was just not possible.
So the Health Minister has said today that this provisional agreement to fund this drug demonstrates the strength of the Pharmac model in delivering effective new medicines for New Zealanders. Do you buy that?
Tricky one to answer. I think it demonstrates that the Pharmac model can work, but I think it also demonstrates that this is probably no coincidence that Pharmac has received a boost in funding this year. I think of $60 million and over and above it was budgeted, which allows Pharmac to then move through its medicines awaiting funding. So I don't think I think there's still work to be done. I think we've still got the opportunity to fund more of these medicines, and I think that means looking at the operation of Pharmac, how it works, and going, okay, well, how did we get to this point? How can we replicate that? How can we keep doing that? And that is really, it boils down to more funding, the ability for Pharmac to work sequentially through its list or be able to buy more medicines and have greater means to do so. And I think there's very much still work to be done there. I think it's a great day for CF and for rare disorders in general and medicines for rare disorders, but I definitely think there's more that could be done.
And do you think your campaigning and agitating has helped reach this point?
I hope so, and I hope so in fairness to everyone that has helped and has made noise and has supported the campaign and has gone out of their way to support what's a relatively small patient group. I think any time that a group of people are vocal in what they're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve, and they have a compelling case behind that, I think that does have effect. I think it's only natural that it does, and I think the hard work of a great number of people have helped get this across the line. Yeah.
So realistically, when do you think Otis will have access to this drug?
In reading the release this morning, it looks like, provided everything goes through the consultation period, and it is an important point that there is still another step to go in this process, but all going to plan, the medicine would be available for patients from the 1st of March.
And that's Eddie Porter. Some leaders in the agricultural sector are warning a ban on livestock exports would cut off an income stream to thousands of New Zealand farmers. The government launched a review into the practice of live exports in June last year, after New Zealand and Australian cattle died after being sent to Sri Lanka. Public consultation closed this week, with more than 3,500 submissions being lodged with the Ministry for Primary Industries. Maya Burry reports.
The review focuses on cattle, deer, goat and sheep exports. It suggests 4 options on the way forward, ranging from making changes to improve the system to a total ban on the practice. Mona Oliver from the animal advocacy group SAFE says their position is clear.
Live animal export only accounts for about 1% of New Zealand's export revenue from animals and their products, so it is a very small industry, and it's an industry that carries a lot of risk to New Zealand's animals and New Zealand's reputation, so we really need to end it for good.
A ban of livestock export for slaughter has been in place since 2008, which means these days livestock are typically sent overseas for breeding or to help build up a dairy herd. But Ms Oliver says many of the destination countries have poor animal welfare standards.
Most countries that New Zealand exports to do not require animals to be stunned unconscious before slaughter. They may be exported for breeding, but they will still be slaughtered in the destination country, and this is a practice that many New Zealanders find abhorrent.
For the year ending June 2019, the value of New Zealand's livestock exports was about $54 million. The majority of that trade was live cattle shipments to China. Last year, 32,000 cows made the 16-day sea voyage to the country. Federated Farmers Meat and Wool spokesperson Miles Anderson says this is an important revenue stream to thousands of New Zealand farmers, and its removal could be detrimental.
It gives farmers another option to sell their stock as opposed to just relying on the meat companies here or domestic scene in New Zealand.
Mr Anderson says MPI thoroughly examines any live export application, and there are strict requirements around water, food, space and facilities.
I mean, if you look at all the shipments that we've had out of New Zealand, I think you'd find that the standards have been very, very high. So, and the losses, as I said, on those boats have been exceptionally low, much lower than you'd get on farm.
Brian Luffhead is the president of the New Zealand Boar Goat Breeders Association. A breeder himself, Mr Luffhead has exported goats in the past, usually by air freight. He says the journey is not particularly stressful on the animals.
I think in the past when we had sheep, for example, going overseas in large numbers by sea, I think there was probably some valid concerns, but I think the processes were improved. I think the air trade of the export of animals is suitably monitored, as I said, with qualified people facilitating the shipment and also a lot of vet involvement.
Mr Luffhead hopes common sense will prevail, but he's worried what the outcome could be.
We've had discussions with other goat groups, if you like, in terms of different breeds. Everyone's very concerned that if there is a ban, the viability of the industry going forward. And we've also got to remember that goat meat is the largest red meat consumed in the world.
The Ministry for Primary Industries says it's now carefully analysing the submissions it has received. It says it will then provide advice to the Agriculture Minister on possible policy options. In the meantime, any new application for the export of livestock will be considered against existing rules. For Checkpoint, ko Mayabari tēnei.
And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, an Auckland iwi reach a compromise over the future of 12 hectares of land. A Sopranos actress describes having her arms pinned and being violently raped by former Hollywood film producer Harvey Weinstein. And scientists in the United States move their hands on the famous doomsday clock. We would love to hear from you about anything you've heard on the program tonight. Particularly get in touch if you're on your way out of Auckland this holiday weekend and there are any traffic woes. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Now, here's the headlines with Susana Lautoa.
Chinese New Zealand parents are becoming increasingly concerned about the spread of the deadly coronavirus, which has now killed 26 people in China. Auckland-based James Sun is the father of 2 school-aged children and says he's worried about schools reopening as families return to New Zealand after Chinese New Year. The Bay of Plenty Police Chief says his staff did all they could to avert a tragic death after a driver refused to stop for officers near Taupo in the early hours of this morning. A 45-year-old male passenger died after the vehicle lost control and ploughed into a fence. The driver, a 28-year-old man, has been charged with dangerous driving.